Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Tennessee Fats, and today I'm doing another in my series of Robert E. Howard's Battle Royales. Now this is the 7th in this series that we're shooting today, and today is going to be on the topic of the shadows in Zamboula. Now what I do in this series is I'm going to take the original Robert E. Howard story, I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of what happened in that story, and spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you what happened. So fairly warned be ye, says I. Don't anybody come back complaining later, oh, you told me what happened. He said, you've been warned, all right? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take two different comic interpretations of that story. And I'm going to say, well, of these two, this one's closer to what Robert E. Howard originally meant to do. The idea at the end of the series is you're going to have a list of 20 some odd comics, which are the ones that are closest to what Robert E. Howard was thinking. So when you want to go out and get your Robert E. Howard on, you don't have to waste your money on the ones that were just way off base. So today we're going to talk about some interesting topics when I go through these, because I'll tell you the two different interpretations that I have, they're different. Oh yeah, and one of them, we have to be really careful on how we're looking at her too, because of the content. There may be Baba Stickies used, there may not be, but there's also something really interesting, which I don't think I've seen anybody else comment on yet, and I might be the first to have actually done the work to get this. But there's an interesting nuance that we're going to close this video out with. It's biblical in proportions. Biblical! Think about that. All right, let's get into the books. And we're back. Now, this is where I do the obvious and obligatory YouTubing every single time. If you like your Robert E. Howard content, subscribe to the channel. Give it a thumbs up. Add a comment at the bottom. I actually like getting your comments. I enjoy responding to them. And so I'm actually surprised how many people are actually Robert E. Howard fans out there and are Conan fans and are actually tippity-tippiting in the dibble-dibble below there. A lot of fun at that. Thank you very much for those of you who are. And for those of you who want to come on board, enjoy that. I guarantee you that I'll find something that'll at least make you chuckle once or twice. So here is the giant book that I go through every time. As I said, today we are doing the Shadows in Zamboula. Now it's interesting, this story later in publication was known as the Man-Eaters in Zamboula. Now, I don't know why they changed the name. I couldn't really tell you. I think Shadows in Zamboula was fairly good. There was shadows in the story, so shadows it is. Man-Eaters in Zamboula, by my reckoning, I don't know. I think it takes a little bit away from whatever. Who cares? That's the story. So, synopsis time. What happens in this particular story? Well, I'll tell you what happens. It's a story which I think is a little, I'd say, mid-career for Conan. And the reason why I say that is because the story starts out with him in a setting in a city that's somewhere, we're going to call it in what the equivalent of the Hyborian Age is Middle East is in a desert town, which is well built up and really well run. By basically absentee landlord kings. And he's there, and he's being warned right off the bat, hey Conan, don't stay in this inn. That's how the actual story starts, which is kind of funny. It starts off with, don't stay in this inn. Kind of a mundane start to the story, but it starts to develop later on. So Conan's there, he's being warned this by a friend of his, from basically when he was a desert nomad, and he was hanging out with the desert nomads. So the reason why he's told this is don't go there, don't stay there, because this guy who runs this place is a demon, and he burns people to death at night, and that's why people always disappear from his inn, and all their stuff shows up in the bazaars later, and it's just bad dude. Don't do this. Conan sort of laughs it off and says, forget it, I'm going to stay there, and he does. He checks into the hotel, he meets the innkeeper, he goes into his room. There's a little bit of a dialogue back and forth of the reason why I'm not worried about sleeping is because I always sleep with a naked sword on my bed. And he goes to sleep, only to find that later that night, the door opens by what he thinks is supernatural means, and he thinks a demon is coming at him. He cleaves it, kills it, and then later finds out that it's actually one of the cannibalistic slaves that lives in the city that's just used twigs and mud to point his hair up into horns, and they were planning on just knocking him out and taking him out, basically to be cooked alive or roasted alive, to be part of this whole cannibal sacrifice, which isn't just cannibalism, it's pretty much a sect. Conan was thinking to himself, well, that's kind of crappy. I don't appreciate being set up that way. So he's going to go and kill the innkeeper. Well, he's basically halfway through thinking, I'm going to kill that innkeeper. For good reason. And he hears screaming. The screaming is a completely naked woman. That's being dragged off into the desert wasteland by 3 more of these cannibalistic slaves. And Conan being Conan runs in, swashbuckling, slashy, kills the 3 of them. And rescues this woman, who then explains that she was run out into the street naked by her lover, who's been drugged because of this crazy guy who runs a temple, who's jealous because she's a dancer, and it's a whole love triangle story. I'm not going to get into it because really it's not important to the overall flow of the story. She basically convinces Conan by standing completely naked in front of him to go and help her find her boyfriend, who's gone stark raving mad because of some drug that she's given him under false pretenses. And this is, I guess, a message later in life for roofies. Don't use roofies. Regardless. Guy's nuts. Conan punches him in the face. They take him back to her house. I don't know why a dancing girl would have a slave in a house. But she does. Puts him on a divan, and then she says, well, listen, let's go and murder this priest so that he doesn't cause problems for me later. And at this point in time, you're kind of following the story, and you're thinking to yourself, really? Like, this is me scratching my head, by the way, in case you can't tell, because I'm off camera. Like, why would Conan be going along with all this? This just does not seem to make sense to me. There's some piece of the story that's missing here, because he's just being led along like a lapdog. And he doesn't normally do that in the story. So it sort of leaves you sit there going, what is going on here? Why with the why? I don't understand. Anyways, she basically says, listen, you go do this for me, you can have me. Now, this is how do I say this politely? This is the beauty of taking these videos, by the way, in one take, is that you get the raw goods from Tennessee Fats here. This is just as it is. It's interesting because Robert E. Howard makes a comment in here, and it's interesting because it's almost like revisionist history looking backwards, wherein he says, listen, she looked at her unconscious lover, that Conan had bopped on the nose and is unconscious, and said, you know what, I have no issues with sleeping with that guy as payment to kill this guy. And there's a very sort of flippant comment that Robert E. Howard makes that says, basically, women of this age are much more, what was the word he used? Was it mercenary or pragmatic? Basically condoning it and saying, you know, these ladies back then obviously had it together, unlike the ladies of today, which is a very judgmental statement, which sort of rung out to me as the reader, like, whatever. Because I've never heard Robert E. Howard throw that sort of a judgmental statement in the book before. Yeah, moot point. Conan says, sure, no problem. If I get to have you, let's go kill a priest. Because what else have I got going on? Other than the fact that he was going to go kill an innkeeper. So they run off to this temple, which is a giant ape temple, break into it. They're separated. They're separated because the girl gets yanked through a hidden door by this giant muscular strangler guy, whose name is Baal Pteor. Pteor, as a hyphenate in there as well. Anyways, Conan ends up finding the guy, and at that point in time, the girl had already been taken off by this priest who knew she was coming. We'll get to why that happens in a second. And the strangler dude tries to mesmerize Conan with 3 different tricks, of which Conan falls for all 3 of them, because, you know, he's not a magic dude. And strangler guy decides, I'm going to strangle you, and Conan effectively just, whatever, steps into him and strangles him back. And basically crushes the guy's throat like, you know, like tinfoil. Whereas strangler dude's like, why is your neck not crushing? Oh, it's because it's a giant corded muscular steel. Like you're some sort of colossus type giant dude. So obviously I, a guy who's been trained to strangle my whole life, can't kill you. Anyway, whatever. He dead. Conan moves on, and cutscene into the dialogue is now going back and forth between the priest and the dancing naked slave girl. Who, by the way, I actually had to go back and reread the story at this point in time because I was convinced, how could she still be naked? Really? Seriously? Why? I thought maybe Robert E. Howard just missed it, but no. She was definitely intended to still be naked. Completely buck naked, by the way. A whole dialogue going back between the two where you get to learn that he actually gave her this drug because she came to him to get the drug just to knock her lover out for a couple hours, not to make her lover fall in love with her, which is what she told Conan. He then springs a trap in which king cobras are snapping at her feet and she has to dance. And Conan basically just stabs him through a tapestry that was behind him, because that's the room that Conan was coming in from. Through the chest, guy falls, and king cobras disappear, because again, mesmerism. And at the end of the day, they go back. She's freaking out, by the way, this whole time, saying, I'm looking for a ring. And that was part of the dialogue between her and the priest. And that I'm actually going to leave to you guys to try to figure out later as to what the modus operandi was there. And he goes back, takes her back to where her boyfriend was, and finds out that she's actually the king's consort. And that was actually the king that he bopped in the nose earlier. And he'll be hired as a member of the king's guard tomorrow. And here's a sack of gold. And obviously, because I sleep with the king, I can't sleep with you, you lowly commoner. Because, you know, enough of that. You might smell bad or something. Anyways, she says, come back tomorrow. I'll make you made a captain in the guard. And you can go and try to find this ring, which I'm sure is somewhere hidden in that temple. Because I really want the ring. And Conan's like, yeah. He leaves. takes the gold, double crosses this queen or consort, goes and buys a horse, goes, cuts the tongue off the innkeeper, cuts off his beard so he's not recognizable, throws him over to the cannibalistic slaves, and then rides out and then sort of chuckling says, hey, I wonder how pissed off she'd be if she actually knew that I slipped the ring off that guy's finger up front and that I actually knew she was the consort the entire time and he was the king the entire time because I recognized him because I'm not stupid. And that's the end of the story. Yeah, there you go. Kind of a quick one. It was an interesting one. I like the story. Kind of weird little nuances to it. This whole thing, with the strangling thing, that was kind of odd. And the fact that, and this is an interesting one, the reason why Conan was going along with this the entire time was because, and you only see it at the very end, he knew she was the king's consort and he was the king the entire time. He obviously was going for some sort of payout here, and you know what? It paid off. Good on him. There's your story. There's a synopsis. And remember, everybody, I warn you guys up front that I'm going to tell you what happens in these stories. Spoiler, it's out there. Which one do I go for first? Let's go for the Savage Sword of Conan. Now, I'm going to throw this in front of you guys here. Boom. Okay. Conan Saga. Now, the reason why you're looking for Conan, well, here. This is Savage Sword of Conan. This is the trade paperback. This is what I actually read my stories in because I like this. It's nice. It's flopsy. I'm not too concerned about destroying it, and it makes me happy. But it's a smaller sized format. And when I was looking, I was trying to find my copy of Savage Sword of Conan number 14, and somehow I've missed this issue, which was weird. So I said, well, you know what? Since I know I have a bunch of Conan sagas, let's break that out so we can show you viewers what it looks like. That's the actual issue, and here's a nuance. This is the issue that reprints Savage Sword of Conan number 14. Now, you'll notice this cover looks entirely different than this cover right here. A little different, isn't it? It's interesting because when I was looking online, I actually saw a reference in error saying that this was the reprinted cover by Earl Norm of that. It is not. Okay, that is definitely not. That is a reprint, I believe, of number 30-something. It is an Earl Norm cover, but it's number 30-something. The actual cover that is the reprint of Savage Sword number what is it? 14. Bingo. Conan Saga number 18. Now, for those of you who will look back on this and you'll say, well, Tennessee Fats, why wouldn't they have just stuck the story with this? Conan Saga and Marvel did this intentionally. They swapped stories with the covers all the time. I don't know why they did that. You'll remember from the Tower of the Elephant episode where I showed you guys what the Conan Saga book was that had the actual cover from Tower of the Elephant on it. And amazingly enough, the inside wasn't in it. But it's funny. Guess what's actually in this? It's the Tower of the Elephant. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm going to give this to you guys in the Conan Saga format because the Conan Saga is a little bit larger than the trade paperback we got going on here. So, here's our story so far. And the other reason why I like these Conan Saga ones, these early Conan Sagas have this really fancy map thing at the front. I love looking at these old maps that the people have recreated. I wish I could actually get a wall print of this. This would actually be really interesting to just have on the wall, so when I'm reading these stories, I'm like, I'm sorry, where the hell is he now? Dude got around. In more ways than one. Anyways, here we go. Bingo, bango, bango. So here's our story. It starts off with, as I said, the warning. Hey, don't go to that inn. This is bad news, bears. And you have this whole market dialogue that's going on here that is going on between basically this desert wayfarer and Conan because they're friends. You know, this is desert. Conan was a desert rat for a period of time, so that makes sense. And that's what they call themselves, desert rats. That's not me being derogatory anyways. It's an actual term from Conan in the Hyborian Age. Anyway, so they got the dialogue going back and forth, but when you're going through this initial story here, when they're having this is really condensed. This is a very quick run through of the backstory. And this guy off he runs like that's it. Like literally there's a page, and now you've been given the sense that there's trouble staying at this inn. Something about the demons is mentioned, but not really a lot of details. And a group of the guards come by. And this is, I believe, a point that Marvel was trying to make, to say that, Conan clearly doesn't respect the guards because they're not even from the same nationality as these absentee landlord kings. They're just hired mercenaries. And he snips the reins and this horse takes off because, he's just being a prick. Whatever, he's playful, I get that. Okay, got it. So he goes to the inn, he gets himself in. This one actually threw me way off. The dialogue between Conan and the guy who opens the door was way off base. This, I'm going to flat out say, I did not like this. Conan's been a slave. At what point in time do you actually think somebody who's been a slave is going to snap at somebody, because this is mid-career for him, going to snap at another guy and actually literally talk down to him and call him slave? I don't know. Did not sit well with me. No. Shows a real disconnect from what I expect the character of Conan to be. Anyways, gets into the inn, a little bit of dialogue back and forth with the guy who runs the inn, shows him to his room, and here's this Stygian scholar. There is actually a big deal about the Stygian scholar that's actually directly out of the story. This is very close. Well done to Marvel. Thumbs up on that. Gets into the inn. He's supposed to throw a naked broadsword on the table. This is a sheathed broadsword, not a naked broadsword. And he locks himself in, and everything's fine. And there's a little garden net outside. He checks it. He bolts the door. Everything's fine. So he goes to sleep, and as I said, the trap is sprung. Guy comes in. These don't look like horns to me. This is, I don't know, some star pattern or something. Whatever. Cuts the guy down. Oh, yeah, cannibals. Yeah, those guys. I know those guys, because he's run into them before. Then he sees the door was actually trapped, and he's saying, I'm going to go and kill that guy who runs this place. And suddenly he sees this. The woman being dragged away by 3 of these cannibals. This woman is not naked. Let's just start right there. Not naked. Partially naked. Very cleverly covered with hair. Not naked. Conan slices down the 3 of them. This is exactly as I would have expected it from the story. Pulls a sword out. She's all scared. Explains, this is what happened, why I ran into the streets. But, we got to go find my boyfriend. And he's like, I don't know about this. And there he is. This is actually a pretty close walkthrough of what actually occurred. I like the fact that they used the blue sparks. That was bang on. Guy only had 1 sword. That was bang on. Very close. And then she's saying, well, here we are looking for a ring. I don't remember this, but whatever. Looking for a ring. And she's like, hey, there will be a price. And I swear it. This is all in. There's some inference going on there. Inference. Anyways. So you're going to serve me in this matter. And he's like, okay, whatever. And he says, let's go off and kill ourselves a priest. Because as I said, he had nothing better to do with his time. Ties him up, drops him off. Again, this should have been a red flag. Why would a dancing girl have a house with a slave and a divan for her to lie on? Or divan, I don't know. Whatever. Doesn't make sense. Heads over to the temple. There's your monkey god. This is pretty close. This was actually very well done. There's a groove in the stairs. Conan steps back, doesn't put his feet on it. I'm not comfortable with that. That was bang on. There's 2 doors behind the temple. Got that. She's looking between the 2 doors. Gets yanked in. Conan's like, rah, 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 all angry about that. Goes down the little curved pathway. Meets Balpture. Now, here's an interesting one. Once long ago in another land, I had another name. Koki Doki. I don't know why that would have been important. But this is a good name, and why Tot Ramasek gave it to me, any temple wench can tell you. The hell is he talking about? And Conan doesn't go down this road. He's like, whoa. He's at no point in time he says, what is this, some sort of inside joke? What are you making some sort of dirty comment here? Like, who knows? He just brushes it off. Anyways, yada, 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 mesmerism. And first thing was the bull, kills the bull, head flies off, turns into pointy teeth, bites him, mesmerism, phantasm, panther, magnetic table. Magnetic table, yeah, giant magnetic, seriously, magnetic table actually was part of the story, because magnetic table apparently is supposed to trap people who comes in the room swords, because I guess they're expecting a lot of swords to come in here. And then Balpture, that's just whatever I call him for now, I don't care if it's correctly pronounced, goes in this long dialogue of, I was part of a strangler from this religious sect, yada, yada, yada. When I was a kid, I strangled infants, and then when I was, a teen, I strangled young girls. It's just getting creepier and creepier, right? And then only when he was a man was he able to actually strangle a full-grown man. And you're like, this dude is effed. I don't know. Well, anyway, so he decides, I'm going to strangle you, Conan. And Conan doesn't step back. He steps into it and strangles him back. And then you got this, note the stoic stance. As the 2 of them are having a hard time, and dude's realizing, gee, Conan's smiling, but my throat's being crushed. This isn't going well for him. Fights back a little bit, and Conan just makes the comment, listen, I killed and crushed the windpipe of a bull before I was a man. Like, maybe you're just killing, weak Western people. Easterners, I believe, was the phrase that Conan was going for. And he breaks his neck. And then we cut scene to the dialogue that happens between girl and guy who runs the temple. Temple priest dude, that's obviously a bad dude. And they talk about the ring. She wants a ring. And you're having more of this dialogue about the ring. And you're getting the backstory to the ring. And there's actually a nuance to this that's actually not in the story, where the ring's magical powers were used on this priest before it was stolen. And she knew the power of the ring. The boyfriend didn't know the power of the ring, but she wanted to get it before, the guy figured it out. And then you get the serpent dance, and stabby, he's stabbied. Conan. And as I said, everything else from here on in runs perfectly. Go back, put this potion on dude that was going stark raving mad. And then magically she puts on clothing and says, oh, by the way, I'm the consort. And here's the whole story I talked about earlier where he basically says, no, forget it. I'm going to go get a horse. This part here where he breaks down the door and tears the guy out did not happen in the story. Goes back and tells these slaves who were all grumpy because they didn't have any food that night, just hold on for a second, I'm going to give you a guy. This Stygian was never part of the story. I don't know where they got that from, why they decided that. It's almost like Marvel has a thing against Stygians. I don't understand that. There's always some reason to kill one in a Conan comic, when maybe there isn't in the broad picture. I don't know. Anyway, so he calls out to the innkeeper. Innkeeper comes out. He cuts out his tongue, throws it on the roof, cuts off his beard, throws him out to the slaves. And then he rides off. And here's our big scene at the end. You know, I wonder what Zabibi would say if she knew that I recognized her as Nefertari and her Jungar Khan the instant I saw them, and I knew the star Korala too. And of course, he switched it off the guy's finger as soon as he bopped him on the nose and tied him up. And then he rides off with a, bunch of money, a ring, and a horse. I don't know, not bad. I mean, at the end of the day, I didn't really like the way that, well, let's just put it this way. I understand why this character was clothed the entire time. I do get that. And I'm not going to say that Marvel did it wrong in that one. I'm going to say editorially, that was perfectly fine. I would say there's no real issue with that. What do I think of the whole running right through of the whole intro? That was a little off for me. Not quite sure what I thought of that one. And then the next question comes, well, what did I think of the ending? Well, the ending was bang on. How they got there was a little off. And I really don't understand why Conan was mouthing off at a slave. I'm not cool with that. Not cool with that at all. That was not what Conan was all about. Anyways, all right, so here we go. We're going to compare this to the Ablaze version. Okay, so we're going to get this out of the... This is the hardcover. This is the third hardcover from the Ablaze series. There's a fourth one out now I actually also own. It does not have this particular story in it. Now, I'm going to caveat this. We're going to go through this one pretty darn quick. The reason why we're going to go through this pretty darn quick is, unlike Marvel, Ablaze was bang on. You want Naked Woman all the way through? You got Naked Woman all the way through, Robert Howard. We will give you exactly what you want. And on this channel, we don't run around flouting nakedness all the time. So, by God, we are not going to do that. But, let's start off. Here's another one of my fancy bookmarks that I always get from my Kickstarters. Love these things. The art was pretty good on this. I actually enjoyed the art. It wasn't bad at all. It was very detailed. I'm not a real fan of the way they drew the face of Conan. Like, check that out. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think they were doing anything wrong. This is strictly an artistic interpretation issue. But to me, it just didn't scream, this is what it is. And here's Conan having his conversation with his desert friend. And what I like the Ablaze did, now, bear in mind, Ablaze had more issues to finish this in. They didn't have to summarize it quite as quick. Ablaze turned around and actually gave the details, told the story of, he's a demon that turns into a demon at night and drags people out to the desert demons, where they burn people alive because they pray to Yog, I think was the guy's name. Yeah, Yog. Not guy, God. Anyway, Conan has the whole conversation with him, off he goes. And then, of course, Conan's over here flouting that he does not respect the guards, and he's sort of smirking at it. I'm like, well, this is a bit of a jerkish move. I don't know about that. And then you get on to the main part of the story where he goes over to the inn, gets into the inn, has his room, and checks himself in. And this is where dude breaks in. And I don't think Ablaze got the whole pointed horn hair thing either, because that does not look like a pointed horn hair thing to me. That's just giant hair. Anyways, kills dude. Dude's down. And you're thinking, okay, well, that's pretty much it. And he's going off to kill Aram Kabash. Or Baksh. And there's, by the way, the hair. Without the glare, there's the hair. Hair without the glare. Hey, look at that, we're rhyming. Anyways, end of the day, he goes off, finds the girl, and this is where we are going to promptly cease for a bunch of pages. What I'm going to tell you is this. There's a lot of this woman being naked all the way through this entire story. Ablaze clearly did the exact same thing I did when they were reading the story and said, whoa, 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 why is she naked? And went back and read the story, read this, and saw, oh, she's naked all the way to the end of this story. Okay, I get it. I got it. The story, I will tell you right now, does follow what Robert E. Howard had in this thing. You're doing perfectly fine all the way through here. This is not an issue. They were bang on. Where things got slightly off. Actually, no, hold on for a second. There is one thing I do want to share with you, which is within the nakedness pages that I have set aside here to not look at on camera. Bear with me. we're quickly flipping through pages here. Bingo, bango, bongo, and no, there's still nakedness here. Lots of nakedness. Bingo, bango, bango, bingo. There we go. Is this dialogue right here? I am Balpator. Once long ago, another name. It's a good name. Any girl in a temple will explain to you why blah 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 gave me this name. Okay, that's where we're going to stop for the interim. Just wanted to point out that that is still there. Exact phrasing still there. It also makes me think that the writers on both sides really didn't know what the hell Robert E. Howard was going for, so they just said, well, we'll just keep the whole thing in because we can't summarize it. Anyways, back to the end. Clothes are on, everybody's fine. She's back and talking, explains the whole story. You're going to come back and help me find this ring. He grabs the money, gets on the horse, heads out, grabs dude, cuts off his tongue. Of course, there's the 3 cannibal guys, gives them to cannibal guys, rides off, same conversation, blah, blah, blah. Wouldn't she be pissed off if she knew I recognized her the whole time? Ha ha ha, off into the sunset he goes. Typical Conan, ha ha ha, off into the sunset he goes. So, of the two, granted, I went through this one pretty quick. The reason why I went through this one pretty quick is because the story does really follow what you're seeing in the Marvel version a lot. So, of the two, what do I think the pros and cons are of these? Well, I have a variety of thoughts on this. All right. I think that the Marvel version that was sitting inside of the Savage Sword really did. I think it was off. I'm going to be blunt about this. I actually really enjoy the Savage Sword of Conan stories. This is what I grew up reading. So to me, I have an emotional attachment to it. So I'm already biased on it. But when I'm looking at this objectively now, at this stage of my life, where I'm going back and reading it, saying, well, how close is it to the written word? It's off. It's just off. I tell you, and the things that are off on this one, and listen, there are respected writers that worked on this thing, okay, that did a lot of Conan. The comment where he's snapping at the slave, that grates me. It just grates me. I do not think that fits Conan's character at all. That just flat out, no, didn't fit. Could have been just bad dialogue filled in a word bubble. I don't know. But that does not work. The whole twisting of the story right up front where it's quickly running through the danger of the inn, it really cut down part of the fear of why this is called Shadows in Zamboula. All of this stuff that's happening here are shadowy activities happening at night. Well, nobody's on the street because everybody's terrified of these cannibals wandering the streets, killing everybody. And it's all very shadowy, hence the reason why this girl was naked for the entire story. You're out in the streets in the dark alone, who's going to notice you're naked? Other than, the giant barbarian dude that you're walking around. To me, that whole thing just seemed off. It didn't spend enough time delving into that up front. And I think a piece of that is because you only have so many pages in one of these magazines. But, I mean, let's face facts. Within this magazine, you have the entire Shadows in Zamboula story, and then you've got a Howard Chaykin Red Sonja story, which at the time was Howie Chaykin. And then at the back, you've got a Solomon Kane story. I'm like, they have the pages. They literally could have made this something bigger, but they didn't. I don't know. It was off, and I think they summarized a fair amount. Now, the Ablaze version, what do we think of that story-wise? Well, granted, I had to flip through a lot of pages for you guys because of the adult content. But, trust me when I'm telling you, the story for those pages I didn't show you really was bang on. They were bang on to the details. They were bang on for the nakedness. They were off on the description of the hidden chamber in the temple. Of the entire thing when I read it, that's the one thing we're like, well, no, they didn't walk around this horseshoe thing before she got pulled in. She was pulled in from the main room. Slightly off on that. But other than that, everything was there. There was a lot more focus in this of her looking for the ring before that whole dialogue with the priest occurred that let that whole thing slip. A lot more focus on that. But it still was there. It was still more accurate to the story. Now, story-wise, yes, this was closer. The main action with the temple in here was very good. That was very close. And I think what Marvel was doing was they were really summarizing down the story, getting away from the whole cannibal story and getting into the temple story. And to Marvel's credit, I think one of the reasons why they might have done that is because, how do I say this politely? The language in here is 100 years old. Some of the language used in here is something that the readers of today are not going to like. There are terms in here that we don't use anymore. And I believe what happened was when Marvel saw that, they said, let's just edit this whole part of the story out and focus on just, the whole temple story. Even though it's like, well, because as you can tell by the cover, look at the cover that they printed on the original Savage Sword. Like, this would infer it's some sort of a giant ape monster problem that actually happens, which isn't actually what happens. It's actually a story of slaves that are cannibals and basically political intrigue with a priest. I don't know. It seemed rushed. It seemed out of focus to me. And of the two, writing-wise, I'm going to give it to the Ablaze team on that one. Art-wise, this was Neil Adams, was it not? Earl Norm on the cover of the original one, but I believe this was a Neil Adams piece of work. Yep, Neil Adams and the Tribe. Now, a lot of people love Neil Adams' Conan work in magazines. To me, my favorite in the Conan magazines is Ernie Chan. That's my thing. That's just my own taste. The Ablaze one, I thought they were kind of funky on the way they drew it. It was just odd to me. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining about how they depict the naked female form. But, I don't know. Something about it seems comical almost. I mean, it's comical, and I'm talking about comic books, which seems kind of hypocritical. But either way, it's comical to the point of farcical. Let's put it that way. So, of the two, the art, I think, in the Ablaze one was a little less than what I would have expected for a Conan one. But then again, this is in the same trade paperback where you have the Iron Shadows and the Moon, which was also very different artwork, especially when you looked at the monsters that were out there slaughtering people. Like, that's really different. But, Ablaze, I think, is doing a good job, and they're bringing different artists to the field, and I respect it. Winner-wise, at the end of the day, when you look at all the comments I've made, it goes to Ablaze. Ablaze, bang on, hit the story. Marvel hurried the story. It's that simple. And which is funny, because they hurried the story so much, and yet they still included the exact dialogue from Baal Pator. And the Sumerian and the Ablaze version did the exact same thing. And I honestly think it's because neither of them actually knew what was going on and why that was in there. So instead of summarizing, possibly being wrong, they just left it as it was. Now, that brings us to the little nuance at the end. So there you go. So there's our conclusion, all right? Ablaze wins this one. That's the winner. There will not be another Battle Royale on this one because I don't know of any other comic versions of this story. If any of you do know of a different comic version of this story, blibbity bloop in the comments below, and I will read it, and if it exists, I will go out and find it, and then that will face the Ablaze version, which is the winner of this battle, for, I guess, ultimate rights as to who wins. Now, little nuance. I promised you guys a nuance at the end of this. I did. And we are going to focus our nuance on... Let me get to the page here. Let me flibbity. Again, it's in the dangerous pages here, so I got to be really careful. I do not need anybody flagging my videos as inappropriate or yada, yada, yada. Nope. It comes back to this dude. Right there. Okay? Baal Pator. Okay? This comment this guy made. And it just made no sense to me. There's the Marvel version right there. Okay? Baal Pator. This comment. It's a good name. And why Todd Rasmek gave it to me, any temple wench can tell you. And I'm sitting here thinking, I think he's alluding to whoring. I can't tell. I don't know. And I'm sitting here saying, this name means nothing to it. Why is it all hyphenated and all doodled up there? Well. This actually, I think, is a good example of Robert E. Howard being somewhat tongue-in-cheek, trying to get around the censors. Bear with me here, okay? Keep that in mind, all right? Now, bear in mind, this comes directly out of the original work here. It's old, okay? When was this actually published? Let's go to my table of contents. This was published in September of 1933, okay? September 1933. I think he got away with this. I honestly think he did. He got away with this because the internet didn't exist back then. It does now. Baal Pator. Something in that name. Go into the Google. Type that in there. It isn't the exact spelling, but there is a Baal Peor. It's a biblical reference. And it's a biblical reference, and it's actually from the book of Numbers. So, I got out my copy of the Torah, and I said to myself, whoa. What are we talking about here? What is the actual reference in the book of Numbers? Y'all can go and Google this yourself, and you can find it your darn self. But effectively, there is, I'm going to call this a canonical story of the sin of Peor, in which the Israelites are out attacking Midianite women, or Midianites. They're out attacking these people. More correctly, they're coexisting with these people. And the Midianite women are starting to seduce Israelite men. And God gets a little angry about this and says, you need to go and punish these people and slaughter them. We're going to call this the plague. And it's called the plague. It's referred to as the plague. And it's interesting because the first reference they did to actually solve this problem was they found two people who were actually in the act of having sex and speared them straight through, both of them, with the same spear. And thus the plague against the Israelites was checked, and those who died of the plague numbered 24,000. Could you picture slaughtering 24,000 people? I'm sure they weren't all slaughtered in the process of, copulating. But odd, right? And of course, where does this reference come from? Well, the god that these Midianite worship, or some of them worship, is Baal Peor. Baal Peor is the Lord of the Opening. Let that sink in. I'll wait a minute for you to catch up. Lord of the Opening. Ask any temple wench. What opening are we talking about here? Oh, yeah. Yeah, you just figured that one out. Yeah. Weird, right? Such a weird, strange nuance. So odd that this was Robert E. Howard basically making a dirty joke in one of his published stories in 1933. And I'm pretty sure it was completely lost on 99% of the readers. Because how many of them would have had the Book of Numbers in that particular chapter sitting in their head at that point in time? Not too many. Thank you, Internet. You're a good thing. Yes, you give me a lot of garbage, but every once in a while you give me something fun and whimsical like that. So there it is, everybody. There is your biblical reference today that apparently cost 24,000 people their lives just because of Baal Peor. Funny. Anyways, that's our video for today. I hope you enjoyed this one, everybody. For those of you who stuck around to the very end, thank you very much. I know we spent a lot of time on the magazine version and not a lot of time on the actual print Ablaze version. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of naked in there. And I was Baba sticking the bloody thing, and then I realized 90% of the page was covered and posted, so what the hell's the point? So, next video we'll put up will be actually a review of the Savage Avengers Volume 2, and talking about the first 6 issues of that prior to Conan basically leaving Marvel. Everybody, we'll see you in the next one. Have yourself a great day.